You are listening to the Football Diehards podcast with your hosts, Justin Lonero and Bob Harris, sponsored by DraftKings. Sign up now using promo code Diehards, DIEHARDS. Make a first-time $5 deposit, and you'll receive a free $3 ticket.
Hello and welcome to the Football Diehards podcast. I'm your host, Justin Lonero, on Twitter at Justin Lonero, along with my co-host, Bob Harris, on Twitter at Football Diehard. Executive producer Kyle Dvorchak on the line at FF Kyle the Kid. Mr. Harris, what's going on tonight?
Not much. The usual kind of stuff. All kinds of, little bit of news and all kinds of making of magazines and hoping the news doesn't screw them up any more than they already have.
Oh, things change quick. Kyle, you did a draft last night, Kyle. How did that work out? I meant to ask you. PPR draft, 12 teams.
Yeah, it was interesting. I think I saw a lot of the typical running back heavy early, but with guys like Anthony Amico or Mike Beers, definitely saw some interesting strategies from some voices I really respect. Good time overall.
Yeah, there's a lot of drafting going on. I'm in a fantasy pros draft right now with a herd of sharps, and it's rather taxing as I look at the draft board.
How are you doing it?
All right. It's still early on, so. Every draft that I draft JHI, I feel like I need to take a shower right after, and then this one I did. So
he's growing on me, honestly. I mean, I think we know that he can handle the football 250 plus times, so it could be
question of Willie.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we're going to start with some divisional stuff this week, and it's going to be a segment touching on every single division in each conference. And leading up to week one. Kyle, we're going to start with the AFC West tonight. Do some news and notes first.
Yeah, we've got our fantasy football summer road trip with Stop 1 AFC West. But first, I have a few news notes, bites for you guys to break down. I think the most pressing issue, Aaron Jones' 2-game suspension. Does this clarify the Packers' backfield for you guys? Bob, floor is yours.
Not at all. It does for 2 games. It does. I mean, beyond that, no. I still think it'll be ongoing battle. The thing you like about this, and I had Jamal Williams ranked slightly ahead already, but it was very slight. And I guess I'm drafting Ty Montgomery late as opposed to either of those guys earlier, Jones or Williams. But this does give Williams an opportunity to establish himself. He can come out strong the first 2 games. We all know how the NFL works. Everybody has a plan until somebody wrecks it. And by wrecking it, I mean in Williams' case, it would be establishing themselves. Maybe running for more than 3.6 yards a carry, something closer to the 5.5 yards a carry that Jones did last year would help. But he's a better pass protector, so that works in his favor with Aaron Rodgers. But no, this is still a convoluted situation where for fantasy purposes, we have to assume that the early down work is going to be split to some degree between the 2 second-year guys, with Ty Montgomery's role a little better defined for me.
I'm with you. I think this is the epitome of cloudiness. And of course, Jamal Williams had twice the carries that Aaron Jones had last season. I think Jones is the most explosive out of the 3 backs, but with Ty Montgomery healthy, I think every team wants a Ty Montgomery role, a player that's going to come close to 90 carries and 40 to 50 receptions. So Montgomery, regardless whether it was Aaron Jones or Jamal Williams getting the bulk of the carries, week one, it's a committee. I think it's a full-blown committee. Now, that being said, with Aaron Jones being out, weeks 1 and 2, I think Williams is going to get the load, and we'll be talking DFS during the regular season. I think that week 1, Jamal Williams, based on volume alone, is probably going to come at a pretty good discount. So it's, ambiguous, as I like to say, at any rate. But now that Aaron Jones is out for the first 2 weeks, I think it narrows things down a little bit. But when push comes to shove, all 3 are going to have a role if they're all on the field at the same time and healthy and not suspended. And it's just, I think, it's another NFL committee. But again, Jamal Williams, like Bob said, I had Williams ranked higher than both of those guys, and he's certainly going to have fantasy relevance early on.
All right, Bob. Jaguars offensive coordinator Nathaniel Hackett believes Blake Bortles' progression will allow the passing game, quote, to be a lot more aggressive, quote. Do you buy into this at all, or is it same old with Blake Bortles?
Same old with Blake. Look, it's going to be hit or miss with Bortles. Maybe he does make a progression, but this team is built to run the ball.
Yep.
If they're able to run that with Leonard Fournette behind that offensive line, Cam Robinson, a year into his career now, little more experience. Andrew Norwell added to the mix, maybe the best free agent acquisition this offseason. This is a team that wants to run the ball and play defense. If they have to rely on Bortles, I think they have the confidence to do it. I just think they'd prefer not to. So it'll be, from a fantasy perspective, I'll remind everybody, Bortles has 3 top 12 seasons under his belt, right? Let's not forget that. Which weeks he's going to show up is what's hard to define. Maybe better as a best ball play, but I don't think consistently expecting him to be a high-end producer is the way to go, because that's not what that offense is built to do.
Justin, ESPN's Mike Rice considers Rex Burkhead the favorite for goal line work in New England this season. Did you already expect this, and were you drafting him like it, or does this move him up your board at all?
Not really. I mean, I know fantasy colleagues like Evan Silver are high on the Burkheads of the world, but I mean, this is it seems like another year in New England where things are going to be crazy. I mean, tonight, obviously they drafted Sony Michel round 1, which some people thought it was a reach. You have James White, who's going to be involved. Jeremy Hill, Gillislee. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how things shake out. I mean, James White, I read some local guys around here said James White's going to be a focal part of the offense. I think we know what Rex Burkhead is. He's dynamic. Now that Edelman's out, you can line him up in different spots. But again, this is 3 or 4 of these guys can have a role each week. So it's you either avoid it or you draft the guy with confidence like Sony Michel, who I think is going to get the most work and probably overtake the Dion Lewis role, but James White's another player that's going to have 60 receptions.
You buried the lead there. James White, the third running back on the depth chart, is going to be the focal point of the offense. Interesting.
Yeah, no, I just mentioned Ty Montgomery. I think that White has a solidified role in terms of, receiving the football, and I think that he's shown us he can have 50, 60 catches, and that's attainable. And Burkhead's probably going to have 30 to 40 receptions as well, but White's been really dependable for the last couple of years. It's cloudy. It's really cloudy, and I'm 18 miles from Gillette Stadium, and my guess is as good as anybody's. And based on game scripts, I mean, Bill Belichick mixes things up to how he sees it week to week. So each of these guys are going to have a good week depending on the week.
Bob, do you share the same sentiment? Just maybe Burkhead's overrated right now, or
I don't know that he's overrated. I just think he's hard to predict what'll happen. I think from everything Justin said, now that's my takeaway is the same thing it's been from every season. Predicting, trying to divine which of those guys is going to be the big scorer any given week is going to be tough. And so you're taking your chances. I think you roll with Michel just as option 1. You look at the draft capital invested in him, and his playmaking ability, and maybe you roll with that alone, but we all know what the New England backfield is about. Last year, I thought Dion Lewis, though, kind of proved that you can rely on a Patriots running back as more than a spot start. I think he demonstrated the ability to be a decent enough receiver and between the tackles guy, and that latter was kind of the surprise for him. It earned him a lot of playing time. His snap percentage was very high, and maybe Michel can do the same.
And it's like you said, Bob, when you talk about Joe Philbin and with the feelings that he shared about Lamar Miller, I mean, these guys are close, obviously more closer than we are. And I think you have to trust Bill Belichick drafting Sony Michel round 1, and there's something that he sees in him that maybe some people don't. Obviously, He's a talented running back, but there's a reason. And the Patriots, historically, since the Bill Belichick era, I mean, they drafted Lawrence Maroney. That didn't pan out. They thought he was going to be better than he turned out to be, but it's not something that they do often. So he's an interesting play, Sony Michel, and I think if he can do what Dion Lewis did, he's going to be just fine in fantasy circles. Lewis finished RB 15 last year, PPR.
All right, final piece of news. Just echo the sentiments we already had on Julian Edelman, because his suspension 4 games did indeed hold up.
Yeah, the appeal was denied, although there was a little hinkiness with the sample. Some issues there. Wasn't enough to get him off the hook. And I don't think, there's going to be a lot of people who run after Jordan Matthews based on this. I think you might want to wait until we see, some preseason activity to see what kind of chemistry and rapport he has with Tom Brady, because that's all that matters if you're a receiver in New England is Tom Brady. And we've seen guys come in like Chris Hogan who built that rapport right away. Maybe we'll see that with Matthews. Maybe we'll see more of an Ocho Cinco like rapport or lack thereof. So that's what I'm going to be watching for but either way, I think they have enough weapons. Some of whom we talked about, the running backs, all three running backs, capable pass catchers. Rob Gronkowski, who knew he's a capable pass catcher as well. And I think Hogan as well. I don't know that I'd be digging deep enough, but I think what I'm hoping for is this news scares people off Edelman and drives his price down even further, because I will be drafting in a big way.
He's a tough guy to replace. Talk about nonverbal communication. I'm redundant when I say that, but when you look at Edelman over the last few years, he has that rapport with Tom Brady. It is clear every time they're on the field together. Kyle, you mentioned Rex Burkhead. He does. I think they can line him up and kind of compensate for what Julian Edelman's not going to be able to do while he's suspended. But it's interesting. Chris Hogan is one of these taller guys that they can use differently. Of course, Jordan Matthews is a taller slot guy he's going to be using. They love Malcolm Mitchell here in New England. So Kenny Britt is there. It's one of these situations where, again, similar to the running back situation, week to week, especially in fantasy DFS, there will be some zigging and zagging going on. And it's the unknown, but they've found a way to be successful all these years. And I mean, all that being said, I think the only sure shot is Rob Gronkowski at this point in terms of that offense.
All right, that wraps up news and notes, and this brings us to our reoccurring segment throughout the summer, starting now, the Fantasy Football Summer Road Trip with Stop 1, the AFC West, starting in Denver. Bob, go ahead. Will the real Case Keenum please stand up? Is he the Jeff Fisher-led Case Keenum that we saw for many years that really was completely unusable in fantasy? And not only that, but he rendered his receivers unusable in fantasy. Or is he the Minnesota Vikings Cinderella story darling we saw last year?
I mean, that's the big question. The Broncos believe that he is the guy can be the guy we saw in Minnesota, or at least a reasonable facsimile thereof. They do have something to hang their hat on. Gary Kubiak, their former coach, was also the coach in Houston and worked with Keenum there. And so they at least have some knowledge of him. They made a quick move. John Elway did. I think the big takeaway at this position is something that should be obvious, but I'll go ahead and state it anyway. When you have three quarterbacks, you have none. Mm-hmm. And that's what the Broncos had last year. Now they have one. We'll see what he can do. My guess is this is an upgrade. Look, I'm not drafting Keenan. I'm in no rush to draft him. But I think if you're looking at guys like Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders, I think it gives you a little greater confidence than what you would have had given the alternatives.
Touche. And I'll piggyback on what you said, Bob. I mean, what we've seen out of Case Keenum is if you put talent around him, he can perform well. And he had that talent, Stephon Diggs, Adam Thielen, Kyle Rudolph last season. I mean, look at the Denver Broncos. Good for DT to have a competent quarterback. I mean, he's been the recipient of a couple giraffes with Paxton and Lynch and Brock Osweiler the last couple of years, throwing him ground balls, and Trevor Siemian. I mean, DT, if he's always going to be on the field, he's shown eliteness over the last 7 or 8 years. We love that. I mean, Demaryius Thomas does not get the love in fantasy circles that he deserves, in my opinion. He's a guy that I want all day long, particularly in round 4. And Emmanuel Sanders is a shade underneath him. I think healthy Emmanuel Sanders is a 75 reception wide receiver. So
yeah, health is the big issue for him. The thing that strikes me about Thomas when I think about him is last 2 years we've been talking about him rebounding from 1,000-yard season and a 900-yard season. So when you're rebounding from that, that's probably an indication of where you're at in your career. I mean, that's considered a rebound, right? Or something you need to rebound from. Even is probably, tells you where he's at. And I agree with you in terms of his skills, probably overlooked and been overlooked in most of the drafts I'm in, or at least going later than he should.
Often his touchdowns are usually right around 5 or 6, not huge, but he appears to be a lock for 140, 150 targets every single season, right around 90 receptions, right around 1,000 yards, and that's perfect. It's particularly if you're drafting him in the drafts that I've been in. He's been my wide receiver 4 in some drafts. If you're flexing DT, your team's going to probably be in pretty good shape. So one thing we know about DT is that he stays on the field. We like that. He's only 30 years old. You finally give him a competent quarterback in Case Keenum. And I think, we're looking at another 90 reception over 1,000-yard season. And I think the touchdowns can only go up. But when you look at 140 plus targets every single season and 2015, 177, we love that. He's going to get fed. And on a cheaper note, Emmanuel Sanders can be that flex guy that you can have later than DT. Certainly doesn't have the sex appeal that DT does. But I'm keen on him. No pun intended. And I think in DFS circles, there's going to be weeks where we're going to want a play like Case Keenum because probably his price. But we saw what he was capable of doing with Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen. And I think that there's a similar crowd of talent in a little older crowd in Denver, but they're good. They're ballers. Manny Sanders has shown he's a baller. So has DT. And I think there's going to be a semblance of a running game in Denver. So we like that too.
All right, that leads us into our final question for the Broncos. What can we expect from Royce Freeman in year one?
I expect him to take over the starting role and be the primary back. Look, here's a guy that's drafted after a career of heavy usage in college. He held up to it well. He's built for that role. I think the thing, look, no disrespect to Devontae Booker, but we've seen them try to pound his complementary back's body into a feature back hole, and it hasn't worked out for him. Maybe he's improved. Maybe he's come along a little bit. The early reports, Mike Kliss from 9 News in Denver reporting that Booker goes in as the leading candidate. Well, sure he does. He's the veteran. Don't get too caught up in that. Mm-hmm. Freeman is the guy that they've invested in to come in, and I think he'll win that job early on, assuming there are no crazy bobbles or it would take some crazy fumbling or something like that. And that's not the guy he is.
Again, I got to agree with Bob, and we had Brad Evans on the show. Of course, Brad Evans is in Denver, and there's been a lot of Devontae Booker talk, and I don't know that he can withstand the bulk. They drafted Royce Freeman, 5'11", 229 for a reason, and C.J. Anderson is out of the equation in Carolina, and I think that Royce Freeman right out of the gates can have 200, 220 carries and be slightly involved in the passing game. So I think things are on the up and up for the Denver Broncos. And obviously on the defensive side of the ball, they drafted Chubb and Von Miller, and they've got a damn good secondary. So it's good to see the Broncos on the up and up. I think that the Booker stuff is nonsense at this point. Royce Freeman, similar to Ronald Jones, and guys like Sony Michel are going to be interesting, and certainly in fantasy circles heading into August drafts. But Freeman's a guy I'm going to want, and he's going to be involved early and often.
One thing I'd like to add, I'd also like to get your guys' take on this. Their new offensive coordinator, Bill Musgrave, comes in, really didn't seem to favor Devontae Booker, and then fed C.J. Anderson. Through his 7 years as a full-time offensive coordinator, his backs have averaged 271 carries and 49 targets. Do you buy into this at all?
Yeah, he's been around for a while, and he has a history, and we can look at that, and I think it's something, look, we're all into the numbers and analytics and everything. I'm still a little bit into the narrative because I don't know that the analytics are as predictive as the history of coaches who have certain patterns they follow. So I would buy heavily into what the pattern of the coaching history is for most of these coordinators. It tends to be pretty solid.
They're 12th in rushing last year. The running game is going to be a part of their identity. So there's no question, whether it's I can say that it's not going to be Booker. Royce Freeman is going to get the football a bit, and it'll be similar to the amount that C.J. Anderson carried the football. So we're looking at one of these belk. I mean, C.J. Anderson got the football 245 times last year, rushed for over 1,000 yards. I bet you a lot of people don't know that. Over the days where there's tons of NFL running backs that are rushing for over 1,000 yards because there's so many of these committees. So
put the focus on Musgrave, though. I mean, when you think about that, when they were run heavy last year. Musgrave was there for six games. They were even run heavier. Mm-hmm. I just think, I'm trying to look at the numbers. 4 of his previous 5 offenses, were either right at the league average or leaned heavily on the run. This, according to Mike Clay, who tracks this kind of stuff. And so I just think these are the things. Look, when I've been playing this game a long time, and I love digging into the numbers and doing all these things, but I think there's things that we can know every year and we can count on, and what we can count on is what, a coach, as Emmett Smith would say, that leopard is not going to change his stripes, right? This is these coaches, they are what they are. It's just like Mike McCoy going to Arizona. It's been pass heavy. He's been a pass heavy kind of coordinator. I think we can expect, him to continue being Mike McCoy, and much to David Johnson owners' glee. I just think all these are the things that you should be paying a lot of attention to, especially this time of year when there's other news and information flying at us fast and furiously. Don't overlook the the basic understanding of the history of some of these coaches.
I love that, Bob. That brings us to Oakland. Justin, you can take the floor with this one. Will Derek Carr ever return to 2016 form? Does it even have to be this season? Is that his peak career?
I don't think it is. I have been a Derek Carr guy. Some people think that he's a game manager. I think, look, John Gruden is going to use Derek Carr. One thing I like about Derek Carr is he was handed the keys from Jump Street. I know off the field he's one of these guys that you want to see more NFL players be like in terms of character, right? You have a young wide receiver in Amari Cooper, so those two are flourishing together. You're going to have some semblance of a backfield. I'm giggling because it's Marshawn Lynch and Doug Martin, but you have Jalen Richard who's going to be in that pass catching role. There's some pieces there in Oakland that we have to like. Jordy Nelson's now. We saw what he did with Aaron Rodgers for so many years. Jared Cook is a viable tight end. Do I want Derek Carr as my QB1 at this point? No. Are there going to be weeks where he throws 3 touchdowns? Absolutely. There's going to be some shootouts with the Oakland Raiders. He's young. He's comfortable. John Gruden's there. I'm interested to see what the Raiders can do with him as the head coach. I think Derek Carr can be a top 15, 18 quarterback in the NFL easily, and there's no way I'm going to he threw the ball 515 times last season. He's not this ultimate game manager. So, we're not going to get caught up when he did a couple of years ago when he threw 30 touchdowns, but I'm also not going to throw the towel in because I think that confidence goes a long way, and I think Derek Carr is one of these guys that that certainly has that confidence. He's just going to get better over time.
Bob, same sentiment, or?
Basically, and again, I think one of the issues for Oakland is we haven't seen a John Gruden offense in almost 9 years. So you look at the coordinator he hired in Greg Olson, a guy who knows Derek Carr, has worked with him in the past. There's a comfort level there, but a very pass-heavy offensive play caller has been. 84% of his touchdowns have come through the air over in his last 3 offenses, and they've thrown 70% of the time. With Marshawn Lynch, they're built to run the ball well, but the way the coaching staff's been put together leads me to believe Derek Carr will be very busy, and they've added some bodies at wide receiver, so I would expect a fair amount of throwing.
All right, so my next question was, and I quote, is Marshawn Lynch a volume buy? Now that you've laid out maybe their offensive plan, is that a no from you then?
No, that's not a no because the price is right on Lynch. It's a crazy good price. Right. And I think people forget, look at last season, what Lynch was capable of. Look, maybe the game plan isn't, perfectly suited to what he does, but when you look at that, how he ran down the stretch last season, he was running as hard as anybody in the league and was very effective. If we start off the season with that guy, maybe he has an impact. His success, if he has it, will have a greater impact on how much Carr throws than anything else. And I think for his current price, you could do a hell of a lot worse. I remember last year we were drafting, Paul Perkins and guys like that were some of the last true, guys we expected to be feature backs coming off the board. Now it's guys like Lynch and Isaiah Crowell and Lamar Miller are the last of that group. I like that bunch a lot better than I like Perkins.
Yeah, speaking of Marshawn Lynch's touch total, or relative to his team, I believe he was 9th in the percentage of his team's carries, so they don't have to run the ball a ton because he will be getting a lot of their runs regardless. And Bob, you've already said that you have no faith in Doug Martin. We could see that number bump up even a little bit. Justin, what do you have to say?
He's 32 years old. Marshawn Lynch is one of the best running backs we've seen in the last 10, 15 years. He's rushed for over 1,000 yards 6 times. Look, just a specimen. Frank Gore-esque. I mean, some of these guys is very rare to see him. You talk about the age of 30, or historically you're old at the age of running back. Lynch is one of these guys that can still do it. 207 carries last season, close to 1,000 yards and 7 rushing TDs. I got to piggyback on what Bob said. The price is right. You're getting the volume back on the cheap. Mike Clay, when he was on the show early in the season, a few weeks ago, gentlemen, spoke about Marshawn Lynch and his price, and I think I know I took him in the draft, and he's probably going to be my running back 4 or 5, and I'm fine with that. He's going to get 15 carries, 18 carries a week. That's beautiful considering you're getting him in round 9, somewhere along those lines. And if you want balance, Bob said they're going to be pass, heavy. Doug Martin's a wash, as far as I can see. Marshawn Lynch, I'm not going to call him Larry Fitzgerald, but could be one of these guys that, ages somewhat like fine wine, and we don't see that often. So I can definitely see Marshawn Lynch being involved and getting the football 15, 18 times, and his cost is where the appeal is at.
All right, speaking of cost being the major appeal, Bob, is Jared Cook a thing, considering he played pretty well last year and is still going outside this first, second, maybe even into the third tier of tight ends?
I think he's one of those guys you can land as a backup, a tight end too with some upside, which would be limited to about 4 weeks at a time. Given his past history, he shows up about a quarter of every season, usually 4 games in a row. Look, that's the problem for me. The consistent season-long production has never quite been there. We all know he's that athletic freak and the guy that we've seen what he's capable of. He just can't seem to put it together. Maybe this is his chance to do that. I don't know, but I'm not gonna burn draft capital to find out unless I really have to. Unless I put myself in a desperate situation, by waiting late on the tight end and, or my second tight end if I'm drafting a second tight end.
Yeah, I think that's a sound best ball strategy because obviously you're taking multiple tight ends in
right.
best ball. But in redraft leagues where your roster is, 14 spots, at that point, why not just stream tight end? Why spend the draft capital like you said?
And he may well be one of those guys you stream. So, yeah.
Yeah, he can start the year with 3 bad weeks and then get a good matchup in week 4, be cut before that, and you can stream him, rub it in the face of the guy who cut him. Justin, final player we've got for Oakland, Amari Cooper. Is this the bounce back?
I think it is. I think it's talk about rapport, and you'll hear me say nonverbal communication quite a bit. I think Derek Carr is going to do that with Amari Cooper. Is his price where I want it to be? Absolutely not. Does he have to knock off the drops? Yes. Is that a part of the growing pains as an NFL wide receiver? Drops? Absolutely. Is Amari Cooper, was he polished coming out of Alabama? Yeah, he was the best wide receiver in that crowd as far as I'm concerned. So, again, he's very young. The rapport is set in stone. He'll get rid of the drops. I think he's a top 15 fantasy wide receiver, and I certainly think he's an 85 to 90 reception wide receiver, probably 1,100 yards in the 8-9 touchdown range. WR 15. He's that gifted of an athlete. He's not as cheap as what's interesting is a guy like Demaryius Thomas will be taken after him. And I think their upside is similar, but Cooper's he's not coming at the bargain. He probably should, given the season that he had last year with 48 receptions and 680 yards, but he did have 7 touchdowns. He's 24 years old, gentlemen, and we talk about a polished NFL wide receiver that young coming into season 4. That's a good thing, and Derek Carr is going to have that rapport with him. I think Jordy Nelson will help Amari Cooper. But right around wide receiver 15, I think this Chucky loves him. I think John Gruden is going to use Amari Cooper, maximize him, 140, 150 targets. He's a player that's going to be a steady wide receiver 2 each week, and he's going to have some huge weeks for DFS circles.
All right, Bob, my apologies to the Nelson family. I left him off the show sheet. He was bad last year. That's gross. Is there any chance for a bounce back for him? And also, while you're at it, is there any chance you take Martavis Bryant?
First of all, according to my sources being Jerry Rice, Antonio Brown, etc., dropping the ball is not necessarily part of the development of a wide receiver. But
right.
That aside,
well, tell that to Amari Cooper. He seems to think differently, huh?
He does. Look, and beyond that, I pretty much agree with everything Justin said about that. But Nelson, look, he didn't look like the same guy to me last year. The Raiders maybe need him more in terms of helping an Amari Cooper learn what it's like to be a real NFL receiver. And look, Amari Cooper has to stay healthy. Jordy Nelson has to stay healthy. I think the Raiders know about him. Reggie McKenzie comes from Green Bay. The Raiders receivers coach Edgar Bennett comes from Green Bay. They have some knowledge of him. But the fact that the Packers weren't willing to pay him the back end of an extension and then the Raiders come along and, overpay him, pay him more than that when he was doing Green Bay, tells you that they think he can get the job done. I'm not going to bet my fantasy fortunes on that. Not at a given price. I might more prefer going with Martavis Bryant. Let's watch it. He survived today's round of, suspension announcements. We'd seen reporting from Michael Gelkin of the Las Vegas Journal Review recently saying that the Raiders were fearing a suspension. Maybe he missed a test or something. So that's always going to be something you have to worry about with a Martavis Bryant, just because he is one misstep away from a lengthy absence. But I think even at that, as a best ball play, I'll still have a few shares of Bryant.
All right, I think that brings us to a close for Oakland. Moving on to Kansas City, I'm not asking this question to Justin because I know he won't show me the directions. But Bob, could you direct me to the altar where I'm to sacrifice my firstborn child to the late round QB god Patrick Mahomes?
At pretty much everyone's house but Justin's. I just think, we've talked about this before. We've mentioned about Miller. At some point, we as fantasy owners, we like to think we're very well informed, and we are. We study the game. We understand, what it takes to come in and take over quarterback position. That said, you have to put some faith in the coaching staffs and the personnel people of the teams. And the thing that I know for sure about an NFL team, you don't let a starting quarterback go away unless you're damn sure you can replace him. The Chiefs did that with Alex Smith, the guy who went, 50-26 as the starter in Kansas City. You don't let that guy walk out. You don't send him packing. You don't trade him away unless you really think you have his replacement. And by his replacement, I mean a guy who can outplay him standing by. I think the Chiefs think they have that. Do you have faith in Andy Reid and his long experience as an NFL coach and quarterback developer to think that he knows what he has? Might there be rocky, look, it could be rocky early. I'm not denying that. I'm just saying, just looking at the information we have to deal with, don't discount what I just said.
So Justin, go ahead and discount what he just said.
Please.
I mean, he's 100% right. You don't let a quarterback like Alex Smith, who, by the way, had the longest leash you've ever seen in San Francisco, considering he's the first pick in the draft. But I think Alex Smith, it was a career season for him last year, over 4,000 yards. We know what Alex Smith is, and he's the ultimate game manager with a set of legs on him that can run for close to 500 yards, which he showed in 2015. So look, times are changing. We talk about offensive coordinators changing, and teams evolving, and I think that Patrick Mahomes, as a fan, I want to see him perform well. But the reality is there's going to be highs and lows, and that's just the nature of the business. He has a rocket for an arm. He can run as well. These head coaches are smarter than we are, of course. He's surrounded with Tyreek Hill. They just threw the Brink truck at Sammy Watkins. You have a top 3 tight end in Travis Kelce. Kareem Hunt is going to get the football close to 300 times. So the talent is around Patrick Mahomes. I think where he's being touted, Mike Clay and Brad Evans, and having him as top 12 QB1s or fringe QB1s is to me is crazy. And it's similar to, Jimmy Garoppolo with a small sample with Jimmy Garoppolo. We want to see Jimmy Garoppolo perform well, but can I confidently take?
It's a small sample for Deshaun Watson. Are you not taking him?
I am, but you're paying a premium, and I don't think that you need to have all the Deshaun Watson or all the Carson Wentz, because I think there's some of these quarterbacks that we've seen, like a Kirk Cousins or a Phillip Rivers or a Matt Stafford, or I think Marcus Mariota, where the offense has changed in Tennessee. We talk about that. Ben Roethlisberger and players like that. Even a Jared Goff and a Matt Ryan. I think I'm going to be more confident in playing because they know what they're doing and they've been around a hell of a lot longer.
Well, if that's the case, what you do is you draft Mahomes at his going rate, and you draft one of those guys at their going rate, which is often cheaper than Patrick Mahomes, and you still have the 2 quarterbacks that you want. You have an upside guy, and you have a steady Eddie who's a proven commodity. I'm kind of taking a similar approach with Andrew Luck, and I would take it with Mahomes as well. If I wanted to draft him, I'll go ahead and pay the market price for him, and then feel pretty confident that I'm going to get a solid starter coming back at some point that's going to be a better value, who maybe he outplays him. Maybe I'm starting Phillip Rivers every week. But if I want to take a shot at that upside, I think that's the point of where the ranking is and where you see him going. You have to take a chance on these guys, but it's not really that big of a chance because there's so much depth of, quality depth at quarterback. You can get a guy who may end up being your starter later.
Absolutely. And you want to see the Kansas City Chiefs move the football.
Why do you hate Patrick Mahomes?
Yeah, what did he do to your family?
I like Patrick Mahomes. He led the country in touchdown passes his last 2 seasons at Texas Tech. The guy's got a rocket for an arm. I'm sick of Alex Smith every season. We know what Alex Smith is. I want to see, some big plays, and I'm tired of watching players like Alex Smith. So I'm just saying, does he warrant a top 12, at this point in time? Of course, we don't know squat. We know more than others, but a top 12 or top 13, from a guy that's never thrown a touchdown pass in the NFL, I just think it's extreme. So I guess I'm hesitant, and I'm maybe a little more conservative where we've talked how deep quarterback is this season. There are 15, 20 quarterbacks that I'm more comfortable taking. Probably Blake Bortles is one of those guys, as sick as that sounds. But I definitely get what you're saying, Bob. You grab a stud, or you grab Mahomes, then you have kind
the
of
upside, right? And get them steady, get the steady you play later.
But and you're right. If you let Alex Smith walk, and he showed what he could do, especially after the season he had last year, they're seeing something.
How many teams would love to have a 50-26 quarterback?
It's true.
As their starter. I mean,
it's true.
I guess that's the NFL. There aren't 32 guys who can play, necessarily be a high-end starting quarterback. So when you let one walk, it says something about the guy you have behind. That's all. Look, and Mahomes could be a miserable failure. We all know that's how it is. It's just all the signs. We're trying to predict the future. That's tricky business. Mm-hmm. It's not an easy thing. So you look at all the factors that go into that, and that's the factor that I'm intrigued by is the fact that they let a winning quarterback walk out the door, a playoff quarterback.
It's
sent
fair.
away.
Yeah, Bob, I think we've found our new segment for the show where you and I rag on Justin for not liking Patrick Mahomes enough, and he's forced to support him at least a little bit just because
I was told that was the basis of the entire show.
Yes, that was the sales pitch for the whole show. Because Justin's just a little undervalued on him. He doesn't hate him. He doesn't say he's worth benching. He just thinks he's a little undervalued. But when we go at him this hard, he has to support him at least a little bit. That's how we get to him. All right, moving on. We've talked enough about Patrick Mahomes. Will Kareem Hunt see a similar workload? He saw one in the league, led the league in rushing as a rookie. Can we expect a similar bump?
I would like to talk about Patrick Mahomes' hair. I think it's glorious. No, Kareem Hunt, this year has been one of the harder years we have to do for all the magazines. Justin knows this. You have to pick a first round bust and kind of plant your flag. And I've planted it on about 30 different guys just because I can. But I think when you look at guys, that are possibly going to regress a bit, it's Kareem Hunt, and not necessarily because Spencer Ware is healthy and they really liked Spencer Ware before he got hurt last year. Circumstances change. Hunt has proven himself. As much faith as I have in Andy Reid as a evaluator of talent and a coach, I also have a great deal of certainty that he's going to forget one of his star players for some portion of the season. Whether it's Travis Kelce, whether it's Tyreek Hill, whether it's Kareem Hunt, there's going to come a time where we're all going, what the hell? Mm-hmm. Why are you doing this? And I don't know if it's circumstance or just, coincidence or whatever. To me, I feel like Hunt's a very good player. I think he's the player we saw in the field. Usage might be a concern. They seem to be moving to more of a, I think they'd like to pass the ball. It turns out that they want to throw it deep, I'm guessing, because of the money invested in Sammy Watkins, the speed already on hand. All these things point to a pass attack. Hunt will be part of that. I just worry that he's not necessarily in a position to duplicate last year's numbers. I would say the same for Alvin Kamara as well.
All right, Justin, speaking of Tyreek Hill, or speaking of Sammy Watkins, rather, as Bob said, what are you doing with the Tyreek Hill, Sammy Watkins wide receiver? Because they're both these athletic guys who can stretch the field. Do you see their roles overlapping too much? Do you see one of them being the value here? I
think Sammy Watkins is the value. I think he's been screwed with terrible quarterback play in Buffalo. It didn't work out well then. There, he had a almost double-digit touchdowns last season with the Rams. Look, Tyreek Hill is not Jerry Rice. I think, like Bob says, you can't teach speed, which is very true. I think Hill's one of these burners, but he's not Keenan Allen in terms of route running. And I hate to be so cynical when it comes to the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes and Hill, but I think that Hill's one of these overvalued players right now. And it might have been more of an anomaly than anything else. And I don't know that if they didn't sign Sammy Watkins, that Hill would do what he did last year. These big chunk plays. If you're a defensive coordinator, you have to do something in terms of coverage to not let Tyreek Hill beat you twice a game with, 50-yard touchdown. it's something that you can't allow. Hill's a burner. We know what he is. Sammy Watkins, if you saw what he did at Clemson, he was fantastic. They didn't pay Sammy Watkins the money that he did not to use him a ton. So Tyreek Hill to me is a 60 reception player, probably around 800 yards, 5 touchdowns. In fantasy circles, he's being in the top 12 or 13 right now, kind of like Mahomes, where am I staying away from Tyreek Hill completely? No, I think if he falls in the right spot, you have to take him, but there's wide receivers that run circles around him in terms of being a wide receiver. And, even an Amari Cooper of the world, I'm certainly going to take the Doug Baldwins over him. Potentially T.Y. Hilton or Adam Thielen, definitely Larry Fitzgerald. Hill's one of these guys where we don't know a ton about him. But again, he could prove me wrong. I'm just saying, I'm a defensive coordinator. I'm playing the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm keeping a close eye on Tyreek Hill every single week so that he doesn't embarrass me.
That's the thing. I mean, speed is what gets a defensive coordinator fired, right? Those are the things. But for Sammy Watkins, I'll just say, that there was a 9-game stretch in 2015 where he looked like, to me, the best receiver in the NFL, playing with Tyrod Taylor. And in addition, if you want a little more on that and how he does it and what he's all about, go check out my friend Matt Waldman's timeline on your Twitter box, @MattWaldman. He has a really solid breakdown this week of Sammy Watkins' skills and what he brings to the table in Kansas City.
Bob, give me the shortest answer you can. Is there any reason to believe Travis Kelce won't do what he did last year?
Nope.
All right, thank you. Moving on to the L.A. Chargers. I think you already touched on this as well, Bob, so it should be another short one. Phillip Rivers, a plug-and-play mid-round QB?
I can't have enough Phillip Rivers. The guy ends every season as a quarterback 1 in terms of scoring, and you're drafting him outside that. He gives you a lot of flexibility if you want to draft somebody like Patrick Mahomes at a way higher price than you prefer, or if you want to grab a Mitchell Trubisky late in the draft, maybe hope for some upside, whatever. Rivers is a guy that gives you the flexibility to make those kind of moves.
Justin, any change there?
No, I mean, Phillip Rivers is a 30-touchdown quarterback. He's going to throw for 4,500 yards. I mean, that's why I'm giggling when you put Patrick Mahomes and a guy like Rivers in the same. It's just kind of odd. And of course, Rivers is not nearly as sexy. I like Phillip Rivers every single year. I like Keenan Allen more and more, permitting that he stays healthy. I think you talk about nonverbal communication. There's another clear rapport there. Keenan Allen fits what Phillip Rivers' capabilities are at this point with these kind of intermediate routes. Keenan Allen's not the fastest guy, compensates with his precise route running. We love that. I think it sucks that they lost their tight end there. But it's going to be interesting to see what Mike Williams, Tyrell Williams are there. And, of course, Melvin Gordon's going to get the ball 350 times. So, again, it sucks about Hunter Henry. I think he falls in that tight end sea of mediocrity anyway. People are touting him high. Rivers is a guy that's going to spread the ball around in about as steady as a QB can get in fantasy circles, and he does it every single year.
Bob, does Keenan Allen think Hunter Henry's injury sucks, or is he the main beneficiary of this?
He is a beneficiary from this. I know Eric Williams at ESPN basically, threw that out there this week again, something he said before and he's talked with me on my Sirius show about. And I think, for me, Allen is a guy that is, a little bit, maybe you're a little worried about the injuries. I am not. I rank him ahead of Julio Jones this year. He's in my top 5. I also have Devontae Adams up there as well ahead of Jones. So I'm insane as it is, but I love Keenan Allen, love what he brings to the table in terms of route running, working outside, working inside, setting up defenders. If you watch entire games of him, he's one of those players that uses his route running to set up defenders to burn them later in the game. He's just a whiz-bang player, big enough, physical enough to make contested catches. Very athletic, does all the things right, and a lot of his injuries have been freakish in nature, which gives me a little better feeling about him.
Yeah, I think supporting the Hunter Henry Keenan Allen thing is that we saw Keenan Allen last year, 9.3 average depth of target. Hunter Henry, you guessed it, 9.3 average depth of target. They're operating in pretty similar sections of the field. Justin, do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I mean, and again, Keenan Allen, like Bob said, he's used in so many different ways. It's impressive if you study wide receivers. Keenan Allen is probably the poster child and somebody that you would want to study. And it's gonna look. He drew 31% of the targets. I want to say the last 7 or 8 games last season. So I mean,
he had 500-yard receiving games, and and
crazy.
5 touchdowns in the 9 of their final games. So what was it? Week 11 to week 13, he had 10 plus catches, more than 100 yards, and at least 1 touchdown in 3 straight games. I mean, he shows up when it matters most. I think we'll see. That obviously, there's an investment in Mike Williams, and he has the kind of big body that can maybe come into play in the red zone. So, maybe he helps fill that void in red zone targets. But with an improved offensive line, I think this bodes well for all the receivers there, and Melvin Gordon. But, you give Phillip Rivers some time. He can do it without time, but you give him some time and he's going to do some damage.
And Antonio Gates is gone, gentlemen. First ballot Hall of Fame. For now, yeah, they'll just keep coming back. So it's I think for me, Keenan Allen, we knew this years ago. If you study football, you watch football, you knew Keenan Allen had it. It's just he's lacerated his kidney. 2016, he missed 15 games. 2015, he missed 8 games. And so who is Keenan Allen? I think that 16-game Keenan Allen can have as high as an upside as Bob has him high as a DeAndre Hopkins, and I think you can bump him in front of a Julio Jones, right? And that, I don't know that I would put him over, probably in the same scope as Michael Thomas in terms of consistency, dependability at this point. And top 5 wide receiver, Keenan Allen. But and if you look at a lot of these wide receivers, they're going to miss a game or two, but just nobody has missed as many games as Keenan Allen over the last couple seasons. And I feel like that's concerning, whether he's snake bitten or not. You're paying a premium.
I think let me go on my injury agnostic soapbox here. I don't think you draft out of fear of a lacerated kidney. Mm-hmm. It's just something that happens. You're playing a collision sport. He got in a collision. ACLs also. I mean, look, there comes a history of them, sure, but he doesn't really necessarily. It's not an annual occurrence. I try to, you have to balance, understanding what someone's injury history is with understanding how injuries happen and what kind of injuries that can be avoided, or, it's not like it's a constant string of soft tissue issues or a chronic situation. I mean, I think those are the things that I'm more interested in than an ACL tear or a kidney laceration.
Yeah, it's about what injuries are predictive of future injuries, and something like a lacerated kidney is more of a one-off freak injury. So I think, like you said, if it was a soft tissue injury or something like we see with these ankle injuries, maybe you not knock him for that. But I think what we've seen from him so far is that these might be more freak injuries than not. Bob, do you have any other wide receivers that you're interested in?
I mean, I want to say Tyrell Williams. Maybe when we get into DFS, Travis Benjamin's always a DFS hero at some point in the year. A tournament hero. But look, I'm not looking to draft Tyrell Williams at this point because I don't know where Mike Williams is going to, emerge as the guy they thought he was, because they drafted him, 7th overall. I mean, there's the desire for Mike Williams to eventually be a main cog in that offense. So, I mean, Tyrell Williams is serviceable, solid, better than we all perceive. I think, it's easy to overlook him. But I'm not going to enthusiastically be drafting him, maybe for depth in the deepest of leagues.
Justin, is Melvin Gordon the safest back you can get at the end of the first round?
There's a scope of running backs, and he is in that crowd there. I think he's a lock for. I think we saw what he was at Wisconsin. We saw and they drafted him for that purpose. 2016, he had over 250 carries, 40 receptions. Last season, 284 carries, which is a ton today. 58 receptions. I have him right in that Leonard Fournette, Kareem Hunt, Saquon Barkley range, and not far from those in Alvin Kamara. And let's hope Dalvin Cook bounces back strong. And LaShawn McCoy and Devontae Freeman, right in that range there. I'm fine with Melvin Gordon. Do I want to draft him round 1? I hammer wide receivers. I think that you can find diamonds on the rough at running back. But, yeah, based on volume, Melvin Gordon is going to have the ball get the ball 320 plus times. He'll probably be among the top 6 in touch, in terms of touches when the season's over, permitting he plays 16 games. So absolutely. And like Bob said about Kareem Hunt, we kind of on the fence about Kareem Hunt with a healthy Spencer Ware, because I think Kareem Hunt got that role by default. What happened with Spencer Ware last season? So we don't, in terms of volume for Hunt. Leonard Fournette's going to get the ball a ton. Melvin Gordon is a lock for 320 touches for sure. I want to see Austin Eckler kind of play the Danny Woodhead role. He's a tough guy to replace, Woodhead, by the way, with confidence. But you guys know how I feel about running backs early, and I'm not going to pay up a premium for any running back unless I have to, and that would require me to have a top 3 or 4 draft pick.
I will say this, sitting down and just not intense analysis. Melvin Gordon is jacked up. I mean, he is rocked up. If you want to talk about guys at running back who you look at and you go, that's not a running back. You look at him. Same with Rashad Jennings, I'll say. I mean, when you see these guys walk up to your table and you're doing interviews, you're just going, I had no idea. So Gordon he's built to handle the load. Some of this is like need him to be efficient with the touchdowns, right? I mean, that's going to be a big deal. But yeah, the workload is there, and I think he might be. I think people who feel like, oh, look at the ADP, maybe people think I'm silly if I'm not drafting Kareem Hunt and Alvin Kamara and guys like that, or Leonard Fournette even, that are going ahead of him in ADP. Maybe you breathe a little sigh of relief if you get that later pick and let the other guys have to draft the flashier players, and you're going with the solid Gordon as your pick.
All right, that's going to do it for this episode of the Football Diehards podcast. Make sure to stay up to date with all the Diehards pod updates by following Bob Harris at Football Diehard, Justin Lonero at Justin Lonero, and myself at FF Kyle the Kid, and Patrick Mahomes at Patrick Mahomes 5. Thanks for tuning in.